Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, Maseches Taanis Daf Lamed. We are holding 8 lines from the top of the Amid. In the Mishnah we learned that Erev Tisha B'Av, Lo Yochel Adam Beis Tavshilin. On Erev Tisha B'Av, one should refrain from including 2 types of cooked food in his meal. Which meal are we speaking about? Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Lo Yishanu. This concern only applies Elo Mishei Sha'ois Ulamala, from 6 hours going forward, meaning after Chatzos. It's leading into Tisha B'Av. It's time to tone down on the elegance of one's meal. Aval Mishei Sha'ois Ulamata Mutar. But if it's still before Chatzos, no restrictions, no limitations there. V'amar Yehuda, likewise, Lo Yishanu. This is only a concern. Ela b'suda hamafsekba. In that suda hamafsekes, the one which is the last meal before Tisha B'Av. Aval b'suda she'eina mafsekba mutar. But if it's any other meal, it's not the last and final meal leading into Tisha B'Av, which relates to Tisha B'Av, which prepares you for Tisha B'Av. If it's any other meal, mutar. There's no limitations. We didn't set any restrictions as per the items on one's menu. V'tarvayu lekulo. And indeed, both these statements of Rabbi Yehuda are meant to supply a kula, which means that it needs to be after Chatzos and the Suda HaMafsekes. Utzricha, both statements are needed. Di yashminan b'Suda HaMafsekes. If Rabbi Yehuda only tells us that this restriction applies to the Suda HaMafsekes, Havamina, perhaps I would think, irrelevant of when it happens. Afilu mishesh shoyos lamato. Even if he's eating that Suda HaMafsekes in the morning, it would have that restriction of Isur Shnei Tavshilin Kemashmal, and that's why he tells us Mishesh Shoyos Lamalo. It only applies in the afternoon. V'yashmin and Mishesh Shoyos Lamalo. Had he only told us that it applies in the afternoon, Havamina, perhaps I would say, Afilu b'suda she'eini mafsekba. Even if it so happens to be that it's a regular meal and not the last and final meal leading into and preparing him for Tisha B'Av. Even then you may not have Shtei Tavshilin, because it's the timing that determines, not the essence of the Suda. Kamash Malon comes back Rabbi Yehuda and tells us, no, b'Suda hamafsekba. This concern is limited and specific to the last and final meal. So 2 conditions need to be met. Timing and essence. The Suda Mafsekes, the last and final meal, which prepares him for Tisha B'Av, which relates to Tisha B'Av. And also, Dafka, if it's in the afternoon, after Chatzos. Tanya Kalishna Kama, we have a brisa which supports the first statement of Rav Yehuda, and it's only a problem after Chatzos. Tanya Kalishna Basra. Likewise, we have a brisa which supports the second statement of Rabbi Yehuda. The concern only applies to the Suda HaMafsekes. Tana Kalishna Basra. We have a brisa in support of the second statement, that it's specific to Suda HaMafsekes. The brisa says, Hasoyid Erev Tisha B'Av. If one is having a meal, Erev Tisha B'Av, Im Asid Lisoid, Suda Acheres. If he plans, if he intends on having another meal afterwards, in which case this current meal is not the Suda HaMafsekba, then we have no restrictions whatsoever. Mutar lechol basar, v'lishtes yain. He can have meat, he can have wine. V'im lav asar, lechol basar, v'lishtes yain. But otherwise, v'im lav, he has no plans on having another meal, in which case this is the last and final meal, which leads him into Tisha B'Av. Then we have these restrictions. Asur lechol basar v'lishtes yain. He has to keep off meat and wine. Mishnah Berurah brings, Chafetz Chaim explains, we keep away from meat and wine because we lost the Beis Hamikdash, where the karbanos were brought, where wine was poured on the mizbeach, and to commemorate that, we refrain from all those items. We stop consuming these foods which were unique, which were special for the Beis Hamikdash. In fact, the Gemara Bava Basra brings that there were tzaddikim who decided after the Churban, they were in such a state of mourning. That's it, no more meat and wine forever. Chacham told them, look, it's not sustainable. You could restrict your intake. You can designate certain periods in the year where you refrain, where you are misabel, such as Erev Tisha B'Av, or as we do it from Rosh Chodesh, to express that feeling of loss, but otherwise it's unsustainable and don't go overboard. In any case, the Brisa clearly attaches these restrictions and limitations to the Suda, which is the Suda HaMafsik, the last Suda. And this supports Rabbi Yehuda. The concern only applies to the Suda HaMafsakas. Tanya Kalishna Kama. Now we have a Brisa in support of the first statement of Rabbi Yehuda, that the concern only applies when it's in the afternoon. Erev Tisha B'Av, lo yichal adam shnei tavshilin. On Erev Tisha B'Av, one should not sit down to a meal which contains two separate types of cooked foods. Lo yichal basar, v'lo yishteh yain. Don't have meat or wine. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Leimer, Yishama, he disagrees with Tanakam. You don't have to keep off wine and meat altogether, as long as you deviate. What does this mean? Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Ketzad Meshana. How do you deviate? How do you change your habit? Now, the Tur has a different girsa. He learns as follows: that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel and subsequently Rabbi Yehuda were disagreeing with the Tanakama. Tanakama sets forth a pretty clear-cut, straightforward restriction: no shnei tavshilin, no meat and wine during this meal. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel disagrees. He says as long as you change something, you tone down, you limit, you restrict, that's enough. And therefore, he says, when it comes to Shnei Tavshilin, as long as you're downgrading, for instance, if typically you have 3 items on the menu, now you only have 2, that's okay. Or as the Rashash learns, he says like this: the Tanakama would hold that even 2 types of cooked food, even if they're the same type, let's say there's you have 2 types of cooked potatoes, that's also a problem. Whereas this shita, Rabbi Yehuda, will disagree. He says as long as it's 1 min echad, that's okay. So you can have potatoes cooked in 2 different varieties, 2 different ways of cooking. It presents as 2 tafshilim, but really it's the same min, that's okay. In any case, the point is the same as long as you tone down, as long as there's a shinui from the typical menu, that's okay. Or let's say he was accustomed to having a big crowd keep him company. Rashi says, in his honor, he would dine with 10 people. Soyed b'chamisha. He has to tone down, go down to 5. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's not just a question of how many cooked dishes, what exactly you have on the menu. You have to make a shinui. Tone down the menu, tone down the company, in addition to the menu. Now we go to the meat and wine. We don't apply an all-out ban on consuming meat and wine. As long as there's a shinui, as long as there's a downgrading, as long as you're toning down. He would typically drink 10 cups of wine in his meal. Now, he has to go down to 5. So Tanakama holds you can't have 2 types of cooked food. You can't have meat and wine altogether. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel and likewise Rabbi Yehuda disagree. As long as you're toning down, you're deviating from the norm in honor of Tisha B'Av, that's okay. Now, this is the main point. When does this apply? Only if it's after Chatzos. But if it's still in the morning, then it's mutter. This is a raya to Rabbi Yehuda. The concern only applies afternoon and during that very last meal called Suda Shemafsikpa. Taisus points out that when we speak about Shnei Tavshilin, it doesn't mean You cook up some potatoes with some seasonings, some onions, That's not what he means. Those are just ingredients that enhance the flavor, the main character in that dish. That's not called Shnei Tavshilin. Rather, Shnei Tavshilin is if you really take two separate things. For instance, they're cooked in two separate pots, or even in one pot, but they're two separate entities. Two primary foods unrelated to each other. In that case, that is called Shnei Tavshilin. Two distinct dishes which enhance your menu, which add elegance to the meal experience. Another chiddush of Tosfos, something which can be eaten raw. Chalav, gvina, tapuchim. Ein behem teres bishul klal. They're not considered cooked foods because you can have them raw. So although the cooking experience perhaps enhances these foods, but they don't carry the same weight. They're not characterized as tavshilim. A similar halacha we have in Avodah Zarah. They're not considered bishul akum, right? If something can be eaten raw, and a guy goes ahead and cooks it for you, you're not really benefiting much from his efforts. It's not like he's serving you his personal food. We don't have the isser of bishul akum. Since you could, theoretically, eat it raw. Eat it uncooked. Says the Gemara Tani, Idach, we have another brayso, which says, Erev Tisha B'Av, Lo yochel adam shnei tavshil, one should keep away from two cooked foods. Lo yochel basar, v'lo yishteh yain, keep away from wine or meat. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Once again, the Chacham disagree. Don't commit to an all-across ban. V'chacham imim yishan. As long as you deviate, you downgrade, you restrict, you limit your intake, that's okay. And Rashi seems to learn that Yishana is going on the Shnei Tavshilin, like we learned earlier, as long as you're doing some Shinoi, which perhaps would mean, typically you have 3 items on the menu, now you went down to 2. Or you're somehow downgrading. Instead of 2 different types of cooked food, you have 2 variations of the same item. That's enough. A Shinoi is enough. And likewise, when it comes to basar v'yayin, it isn't an absolute ban. We might be basar v'yayin, as long as you downgrade, you limit, you minimize. Ketam might. In what way do you do that? This fellow is accustomed to having this large amount of basar in his meal. Litra is a certain weight, a pound of basar, let's say. Now he should go down to a half a pound. He would typically drink a whole bottle of wine. Go down to half a bottle. But a fellow who typically doesn't have wine or meat during his meal, in that case, there's no room for changing, for shina, for downgrading. This fellow indeed can't have it at all. I'll give you another exception, another exemption. If this fellow was accustomed to having some radish, or maliach, which Rashi says, aged meat, heavily salted meat, which is already a couple of days old, in which case it lost its original flavor, lost its meatiness. He's accustomed to having it after his meal. He can go ahead and do so. Tanidach. We have another brayso which says, Kol shu mishum Tisha B'Av. Here is a big chiddush. Kol shu mishum Tisha B'Av. Rashi says, this means, Kigoin Suda Hamafsek. He's already involved in that pre-Tisha B'Av experience, in the Suda Hamafsek, which prepares him from Tisha B'Av. He's already associating with Tisha B'Av. At that point, we apply the Tisha B'Av restrictions to him. Also lechel basar, v'asal l'shtos yain. He has to keep off meat or wine. Here comes the chiddush. V'asal l'rchetz. He can no longer bathe himself. He can't wash himself with hot water. He can't wash himself with cold water. We treat it just like Tisha B'Av itself. Kol she'enim shem Tisha B'Av. But if he's not engaged in an activity which relates to Tisha B'Av, let's say he's having a meal in the morning, nothing to do with Tisha B'Av, or it's a meal before a different Taanis, so it's not Tisha B'Av related. Mutar lechol basar, v'shtos yain. You can have meat and wine. V'asar, and some take out the word v'asar and change it to mutar. Umutar l'rchatz, and rechitza certainly is mutar. So according to Tanakama, Isser Rechitza applies, and Farshim point out that it's mashma from the Gemara. Dafka Isser Rechitza applies at this point. It's considered like semi-Tisha B'Av. But other restrictions like wearing shoes, etc., don't apply at this point. Why? What's the difference? Says the Ramban, because rinsing, washing, bathing, that affects a person for the long term. He'll come into Tisha B'Av feeling fresh and clean. So the Isra Rechitza starts already now. He has to look after Tisha B'Av, starting from this point. So Isra Rechitza applies already now. Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yosi Emer no. He quotes his father, Mishem Aviv, who was Rabbi Yosi, Kol Shah Shemut Alechel, as long as you can eat, they take out the word basar, but Alechel you can wash. We don't expand the Isra Rechitza into Erev Tisha B'Av. Tanu Rabban. How do we define, how do we package the Tisha B'Av restrictions? We know certainly it's not like a regular Taanis. We have Nilsa Sandal and Rechitza, all those halachas. How do we define it? Kol mitzvahs hanehagos be'avel. All those restrictions and limitations apply to an avel. Lo yelenu, throughout the Shiva period. Nehagos b'tes b'av. We follow on Tisha B'Av as well. Plus more. Because an avel can eat. He can eat and drink. He can even have meat and wine. We had that earlier in the Masechta. L'fchuchet tzari. To help him alleviate his anxiety. We don't want to crush him during that difficult period. But on Tisha B'Av, we have Avelis plus plus. Asa b'achilu v'shtiya. We don't eat and drink either. Because in that sense, it's like a Taanis. We pain ourselves. We distress ourselves. We go through tsar to experience teshuvah, hachna'ah, and kapara. So it's really a combined entity. Tisha B'Av is an enhanced fast day, right? It's like those 7 last fast days that we had. Plus, we add elements of Avelis as well, of mourning. It's meant to bring us to Tshuva, Tachna, and we focus on the Churban HaMikdash. That's the focal point of the day. That also brings us to Tsar, brings us to Tshuva, to Kapara, to merit the rebuilding of the Mikdash. So it's Asa B'Achilu V'Shtiyah, Ubesicha, smearing, Ubenesa Sandal, Ubetashim Shamit. V'aso Likrois. Here comes the added element, which is unique to Tisha B'Av, on account of the fact that it's a Yom Avelus. So just as an Avel cannot learn Torah, likewise on Tisha B'Av. V'asa likrei b'Torah, b'Nevi'im, b'Ksuvim, v'Lishnis b'Mishnah, v'Talmud, Gemara, v'Medrash. Those are the brises, expounding on the Psukim, b'Halachis, Halachah Mishim Sinais, v'Agodes, Divrei Agodah. Because these things bring simcha. Pikudei Hashem Yisharm b'samchei leiv. We want to be subdued on Tisha B'Av, even in a spiritual sense. And therefore we refrain from learning Torah. Aval, we allow some learning. He can read Psukim, which he's not accustomed to reading, which he's not familiar with. Rashi says, it's a tsar, because he doesn't really understand, doesn't grasp what he's learning, so he doesn't have the true satisfaction of that learning experience, and therefore doesn't constitute a contradiction to Avelis. He can learn Mishnayos that he's not familiar with. What else? He can read Eicha, Be'iyov, sad story of Eiv and all his calamities. The Psukim describing Puranas in Yirmiyah, and the place can add, you can learn the 3rd parak of Ma'id Katan, Elam Magalchan, speaking about the Sugya, speaking about Avelis. V'tinoike shabis Rabban is a gersa einan betelan. However, children in yeshiva should not stop learning, because they're not obligated to participate in Avelis. They're youngsters. And the chiddush is that even the Rebbe has to go and teach them. So although he's learning Torah, he's an adult, he shouldn't be learning Torah. But he's meshubah to them. He's bound to teach. He's bound to his obligation. He has to teach them. He has a job. So they continue learning. Some take out these words and only have it later on in review the sheet. So according to Tanakama, don't learn except for things that you're not familiar with, except things that are dvarim haraim, and children remain in session. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees on both accounts. Rabbi Yehuda agrees. He shouldn't be learning things that he's not familiar with. He shouldn't read psukim or learn mishnayos that he's not familiar with, because at the end of the day, ultimately, the words of Torah satiate one's soul, bring glee and satisfaction to his neshama. Whether or not you're truly delving into the topic, even superficial learning has a profound spiritually satisfying effect on the person. He agrees that you can learn those things that describe negative things, negative events, and the Aruch HaShulchan explains because when you read about tzoros of Klal Yisrael, even one's neshama gets affected. So that counterbalances for the hana that he has. So although you have spiritual hana from learning anything, but the fact is you're learning things which are describing tzoros of Klal Yisrael, and that distresses a person's neshama. And it's mutter on Tisha B'Av. That's number one. So you disagree with Tanakama regarding things that a person's not familiar with. Torah affects a person in a profound way. Don't do it. Number two, he says, kids, schools have off. The fact is, Hashem's Torah is a person, and the Rebbe has no business teaching on Tisha B'Av. He has no. Explains the Gvurus Hari. We have a Gemara in Shabbos that whenever Mavatal, Tigneika shel Beis Rabban, even for Binyan Beis HaMikdash, that's an accepted halacha. Says the Gvurus Hari, that Gemara perhaps forms the basis for our machlekes. Tanakama held, look, just as we find in that Gemara, the Rebbe should be participating in the Binyan HaMikdash, right? So how can we say that the kids are going to be learning? Without a Rebbe, they're not learning. Evidently, we leave the Rebbe behind. We allow him to teach the kids because he's meshubah to them. He has to keep them learning. So true, he has a chiyuv to go build a mikdash, but his first and foremost responsibility are to the kids, and therefore he stays there and teaches them Torah. Likewise over here on Tisha B'Av, although he himself is not meant to be learning Torah, but the kids need to learn, so he can stay on for the kids. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Big difference. Over there by the Beis HaMikdash, it's Sheva al Tasa. He's sitting passive. He's not participating in the Binyan HaMikdash. He's not doing anything wrong. He's not doing a maaseh. That's wrong. So in that case, certainly he stays behind in the yeshiva and instructs the kids. But when it comes to Tisha B'Av, true, the kids have to learn, but the Rebbe is not allowed to learn. He can't engage in that learning experience. The classroom experience is pleasure for the Rebbe. It's mesamech leiv. Here he's doing a maaseh, which is inappropriate. This is different, and this is also. And therefore, he says by default, the kids are going to be off on Tisha B'Av. Okay, so in conclusion, we have 4 types of limud. Enjoyable learning, according to all sheitas, is us. Dvarim haraim, learning about tzoros, etc., that's certainly mutter. Regarding learning things that you don't really have a taste for, you're not really familiar with, you're not going to delve into it. Or in the case of a Rebbe teaching the kids, Tanakama says, mutter, Rabbi Yehuda says us. So during Sudam Afsekas, we learn about keeping away from meat and wine. Tana, the Brisa added, Aval eichlu basar maliach. As mentioned earlier, basar maliach is the heavily salted meat. It's a couple of days old, it lost its freshness, its meatiness, it's no longer really mesamech the person, and that's mutter. V'shoyse yain megitay. Likewise, he can drink freshly squeezed wine, right out of the wine press, which is still bubbling and fermenting, and not really tasty. Basar maliach ad kama. Until what point is still considered fresh meat? Meaning, from one point onward, do we consider this basar maliach and would be mutter. Rav Chinna bar Kahana meshmei Shmuel kozman shehu k'shlamim. Until the point that a shlamim, as long as a shlamim, if this meat would be shlamim meat, it could still be eaten within the first 2 days or so of shechita. That's still considered fresh enough. We find that Torah calls it basar. It still retains its original form, its natural flavor. It's considered basar. But past that point, it loses that freshness. It loses its meatiness and its mutter. So the connection to shlamim, says Rashi, is pretty much just like a remez. We see in the Pesukim that the Torah considers it basar for the first 2-3 days. The Torah describes the basar shlamim as basar. So apparently up until that point, it still retains its basar characteristics. But past that, it loses that original flavor and would not be asur during Sudam Afsekes. V'yayin megiti at kama, until what point do we consider something yayin megiti, fresh wine? Calls one shutoises as long as it's bubbling. It's interesting that Tosis points out here that although in the Gemara we seems to say that basar maliach, yayin Tosis would be mutter, but he says nowadays we are ruggle, we are accustomed to having this type of meat as well. And therefore he says for us it's not really considered a downgrade, and we should keep away from this basar as well. And I saw in the Poskim the same thing regarding fresh wine. We drink grape juice. And therefore the minhag is to keep away from that type of wine as well. And just as a general thing, Tosfos says a person should be memayit b'shtiyasei. Whatever a person is accustomed to drinking, Coke, should go down from 10 cups to 5. So it's not only specific to wine or meat. Generally, a person should downgrade, should be meshana, restrict his intake during Sudam Afsekes. In fact, he says tzorach l'shanis mekayimai. He should change his seat. Shu ragalecha boy, just like we're going to see soon, that Rabbi Yehuda Kessler would sit on the floor in an unclean place as a sign of avelus. And the minhag today is that Sudam Afsekes involves sitting on the floor with some bread, an egg, some ashes. Indeed, we do minimize and we limit it to the bare minimum. In fact, we don't sit together. We're mezuman. We don't want to make it into an event. It says yeshiv badad v'yidayim, each one on his own, a sign of avelus. In fact, it's brought in halacha that if it so happens that some fellows get together and have this enough sekas, you still won't say zimun, because although it is together technically, but each person's on his own. It's lacking kviyas. We don't have that established mealtime experience because each one is just sitting on his own. It's avelus. It's not a joint experience, which would require zimun. Interesting chiddush and halacha. Okay, back to the Gemara. 2 lines from the bottom. Tana. The Brisa added as follows: Yayin toises. You have this bubbling wine, in which case it doesn't have a concern of gilui. What is gilui? So if you leave an uncovered, an exposed liquid, for instance, wine, things that a snake would be attracted to, there's a concern that he may have come and drank from it and deposited some venom. Today we're not really so concerned about it, at least in Mekayimos of Yishuv. But certainly out in the country, out in the wild, the concern would still apply certainly today. But in a Mekayim of Yishuv, and a Mekayim of houses, the concept of the prevalence of Nechashim isn't really so common, and therefore we're not so makpid. In any case, if it's bubbling wine, the snake keeps away, he hears bubbling, it scares him off. Until a point is it considered yain toises, 3 days since pressing, it has that bubbling phenomenon. Amar Vidamarav, Kachayim in Hagai, Shel Rabbi Yehuda Rilai. You want to know what Rabbi Yehuda Rilai used to do? How he used to have a Sudam Afsekes as follows: Erev Tisha B'Av. On Erev Tisha B'Av, and some say this was the Sudam Afsekes, they would serve him a dry piece of bread, b'melach with some salt. He would find himself a spot between the oven and the stove. Rashi says, the most unclean place in the home. This was an expression of a mourning. He would have that bread. He would add to it a jug of wine, of water. And in his expression, he would present like an oval, of the worst proportions. Like he had a fresh mace there. So although this was an old churban, past event, for the tzaddik Rabbi Yehuda, it was fresh, like it happened today. He mourned like it was an event that happened today. There was a famous story that Napoleon, they say he visited a shul on the night of Tisha B'Av. He's dressed like an ordinary person, and he sees everybody sitting on the floor, crying, lamenting. He thought something must have happened, a terrible tragedy. So he turned to the first person and says, what happened? Well, tell me what's going on. So he said, what do you mean? We lost our holy temple, our Beis HaMikdash. He says, oh wow, that must have been terrible. He was empathizing. He says, tell me, when did it happen? He said, well, about 1700 years ago. He says, he couldn't believe it. And he's still crying for an event that occurred 1800 years ago. So he said, yeah. This is what it's all about. Our life is connected to the Beis HaMikdash. That's our focal point. It's our connection to Hashem. And we mourn. We're misabel year after year after year without let up. Napoleon was so impressed. Never seen such a thing. Still crying for something that's so far gone. And he walked out and he said, that's the secret of the Jewish nation's immortality. That's the secret of their survival. They're still connected. They're still rooted in that Beis HaMikdash. They haven't forgotten. When you cry about something, apparently you still have hope for it. If it's something that's totally gone, there's that disconnect. It wouldn't even elicit a cry. Something that you can relate to, that you miss, that you long for, that you yearn for. You're going to re-experience in the future, just waiting for it to come back. That elicits a true cry. So the Avelis of Tisha B'Av isn't just crying about something bygone. The Avelis is that experience of Kara Alai Moyed. It's a Yom Tov, Farshim explained. It's a closeness. It's an expression of longing, which means closeness. If you're not close to it, you don't long for it, you don't yearn for it, you don't miss it. Apparently you can relate to it. You can relate to the Beis HaMikdash. Even nowadays, that's what you're crying about it. That's Kara Alai Moyed. It's a Yom Tov. Yom Tov means it's an occasion. It is an occasion. Occasion to bring out that closeness to Hashem, which don't necessarily experience throughout the rest of the year. So, the greater you are, Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi, for him it was immediate, it was real, it was right in front of him. Here's the Mikdash. Where am I? Why am I not connected? It was K'meisi Mutalafon. Tanan Hasan. We went to the Mishnah back in Pesach. What about doing Malach on Tisha B'Av? Makam Shenago, Lasas Malacha B'Tisha B'Av Oisim. It all depends on Minhag HaMakam. Minadin, we allow Malacha. By the way, the Rosh points out, back on Amud Aleph, we have that connection between Tisha B'Av and Avelos. So the Rosh says, not in all ways. We don't compare it all the way, meaning there are things that an Avel will do that we don't do on Tisha B'Av. Atifa Sarosh Kriya. We don't do that on Tisha B'Av. So he says the Gemara Dafka means restrictions, Isurim. No Sicha, no Nilas HaSandal, those things. But there are things that are sort of positive things that the Avel does that we don't do. Likewise, he says, that's when it comes to tefillin. We wear tefillin on Tisha B'Av because even though the Avel won't wear it on the first day, but that's a limitation for the first day. It's a restriction on V'achrisa Kiyei Mar. But theoretically, Avelis doesn't really contravene tefillin. The fact is, he puts on tefillin the rest of his Avelis. And likewise, he says, Malacha. An Avel typically refrains from Malacha, but at a time of necessity, when it's a Shasat Chak, the Halacha allows the Avel to do Malacha after 3 days. So that's why we don't have these things on Tisha B'Av. These aren't really absolute restrictions for the Avel. So technically you can do Malacha on Tisha B'Av, but in some places that are minute to refrain. Why? Because this allows them to free their minds and their hearts. It's what's really important, to focus on the Avelis. So you follow Minhag HaMakam. Makam Shenago Lasas Malacha B'Tisha B'Av Ois. In a place that had minhag to do Malacha, you follow the minhag. Makam Shenago Shaloi Lasas Einos. In a place where the minhag was to refrain from Malacha, you follow that minhag as well. You don't do Malacha. Ubechal Makam Talmid Chacham B'Telam. Now, in any case, wherever you are, Talmid Chacham, who are living in a higher realm, and are meant to feel, the Meiri says, they're meant to feel, to be margish the chisoron of the churban, of the missing Beis Hamikdash, they're meant to be bottled from malacha altogether to express that true avelus on the Beis Hamikdash. Now, by the way, the Ramah says when we speak about not doing malacha on Tisha B'Av, doesn't mean turning on the light. It means a malacha sheyesh by shihu yiktsas, he says, something which requires delay and involvement and immersion. Because again, the point is not to divert one's mind, not to mesiach das. So a quick phone call, a quick malacha, that's not what we're speaking about. We're speaking about something which requires shihui, requires immersion and diversion from the avelus. He says it's not gava. If an ordinary person decides, you know what, when it comes to Isra Malacha, I'm a Talmud Chacham, I live higher standards, I will not go to work on Tisha B'Av, I will do avelus. Don't think it's a gava, because it's not a matter of honor. He's not getting covered for it. He's not sitting up in the Mizrach on the head table. He's just doing avelus the way it's meant to be. He's a sincere fellow. So there's no concern of holiness. Anybody can present as a Talmud Chacham in this regard. Tani Nami Hacham, we have the same in the Brisa. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Lo Olam Miyaso Adam Atzmoi Ke Talmud Chacham Kidei Sheyis Ana. Point is not just to present as a Talmud Chacham, to enhance, to facilitate, to enable proper inui, proper immersion in the Avodas Hayah. Tani Yidach, we have a Brisa. Rabban Shimon Gamliel Omer, Kol Eichel V'Shoyse B'Tisha B'Av. One ignores the fast day, eats and drinks on Tisha B'Av. It's equated to eating and drinking on Yom Kippur. Why? What's the connection? Says the Chassam Sofer. Inui, Tsar, Avelus, on that Churban Beis Hamikdash, gives a person kapara. The Churban Beis Hamikdash brought about kapara for Klal Yisrael, and the more you relate to it, the more you connect to it, the more kapara you have. This fellow ignores Tisha B'Av. He will not have that benefit, that kapara from the Churban Hamikdash. It's as though he ignores as though he ignores Yom Kippur, in which case he misses out on the kapara experience. Rabbi Kiva Omer, if one involves himself in malacha and diverts his mind from the fast day, although it's not asr, but much bracha, much success and blessing he will not see from that particular endeavor, that particular business venture, Rashi says, ma'osa malacha. A person is involved in malacha in a way which diverts him, distracts him from avelus in Yerushalayim. He will not be zoicha to experience the joy when things turn around for us. Who will take part in that celebration, that grand simcha, when Yerushalayim will come around, will be rebuilt? Only those who experience the avelus, who were there when things were bad, when things were going rough, they will be zeicha to re-experience Yerushalayim the way it's meant to be experienced. Bikan Amru. Chacham concluded, Kolamas Abel Yerushalayim zeicha v'roi b'simchas. Person is abel properly, he's zeicha to eventually experience the simcha of Yerushalayim. V'she'enem is abel Yerushalayim. Otherwise, Einei roya b'simchas, he will not experience the simcha. Tani nami hachid, the same in the Brisa. Kol oichel basar, v'shoyis yayin b'Tisha B'Av. If one ignores the Yisurim, he has his basar, he has his yayin on Tisha B'Av. Rashi learns, it's speaking about Sudam of Sekas. So even then, Olav HaKosav Omer, on him the Pasuk says, V'atiyah v'noisam, al atzmoisam, their sins will be attached to that. Some ways, when one eats it inappropriately, it enters his body, it gets absorbed into his system. It's part of his essence, and that oven will be attached to him. The Taanis adds, Taanis on the top Taanis here, the third line from the top, he says, the Iker is the spirit. We speak about this or that restriction, but it's more than that. A person should seek to minimize his comfort, his pleasure, his kavod, ubana oisav. On Tisha B'Av, for instance, Shema Yiragel Shchayv al Pshnei Karm. He had 2 pillows that he uses per night. Minimize. Toss away one. Use one tonight. That's only if you can handle it. Avul ubrois or menikois. Einon chayvus k'lihai. We don't burden the ubrois and menikois. She'enim mecholos letztar ba'atzman. So it's all a matter of what you can do. Mishtatev. Express avelos b'mayit. Personal hana and pleasure, and focus on the churban Beis Hamikdash. And that will bring about zoiche v'roya b'simchasa. By the way, this Fasema says a diak. Zoiche v'roya? He's Mesabel Yerushalayim. He's zoiche v'roya? It should say yiske v'yira in the future. Why does the Gemara present it in present tense? He is zoiche v'roya b'simchasa. Says this Fasemas, gewaltige word. Right now, currently, he's already experiencing that ray of joy in his heart. As we said earlier, the Avelis connects him to the concept. When he is misabel, he feels the Beis Hamikdash. He sees the future. He sees the potential. He has that optimism in his heart. It's going to come back. He's already experiencing that future simcha already somewhat currently. Gives him that zichach, that purity, that he's already roya b'simchas on his mind's eye. He already sees, very quickly, very soon, there's going to be a binyan Beis Hamikdash. We'll be back home. Continues the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda says you have to overturn your bed and sleep on the floor on Tisha B'Av night. Chacham disagree. That's not necessary. So according to our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda requires overturning beds and sleeping on the floor. Chacham say, no, we don't do that on Tisha B'Av. Tanya, in the Brisa, we had a slightly different version of this discussion. Amru loy Rabbi Yehuda. Chacham turned to Rabbi Yehuda. Lidvarech, according to you, you have to turn over the beds and sleep on the floor. What about the ubris and menika, expectant and nursing women? Matei Alein, what are they going to do? It's not practical for them. It could endanger them. Amalem, he responds, Afani lo yamarti el biyachal. True. I only meant somebody who could handle it. So their argument was, look, if you're going to make a takana, it has to be sustainable. It has to be all across the board. If they can't do it, then just skip the takana. He says, no. Whoever can do it. Tani Namiyachi, we have the same in the Brisa. That Moed Rabbi Yehuda Chachamim, Rabbi Yehuda agrees, V'she'eni yachal. If one can't handle it, he's exempt from turning over the bed. Umoedim Chachamim, Rabbi Yehuda b'yachal. And certainly the Chacham agreed to him that if you can do it, you meant to do it. So according to the Brisa, it seems like everybody agrees in concept. You meant to sleep on the floor if you can handle it. So when you're yachal, all agree you meant to do so. Rabbi Yehuda and Chacham both agree you meant to do so. If it's any yachal, if it's not practical, it's not feasible, it doesn't apply to you. So it seems like there really isn't any machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and Chacham. My binayu, what's the difference between the shitas here? They both seem to be saying the same thing. If you can handle it, do it. If you can't, you don't. The question is regarding the rest of the beds at home. Because the Taanis, we learned in a Brisa in Maseches Moed Katan by the Avel. There's a halacha of Kfiyas Hamita. The two parts to Kfiyas Hamita. Turn over your bed. They used to sit on beds. To turn over your bed, don't enjoy your bed. Sit on the floor. And also, turn over all the beds in the home. There's another din. Moed Katan says, what does it symbolize? Hashem tells the person, look, Demusti Kyuni Nasati Benechem. I inserted my form, so to speak, amongst you. A human being as a Tzelem Elokim reflects Hashem's image. Because of your Averis, Cheta, the Marishan, all that brought about Misa, and you overturned, so to speak, the Tzura of Hashem within the person. Turn over your beds. We'll see that as Hashem and Moed Katan. So there's a din to turn over all the beds in the home. And that's the question. What happens on Tisha B'Av? Kedesanya. K'she'amru lichboi samita. Chacham said, turn over beds. Lo mitasab levadu koife. That's not limited to his personal bed, which would require him to sit on the floor. So this brings him a lack of comfort. That's not enough. You turn over all the beds to symbolize this concept of b'mahapach the tzura. So that's by the Avel. What about on Tisha B'Av? Rabbi Yehuda says, look, we apply that concept here as well. It's time for Avelis. Just as the Avel during his Shiva does this, we do it on Tisha B'Av as well. Chacham disagreed. We don't have to compare the two things. Avelis of a mace is one thing, based on that reason that we mentioned. Tisha B'Av is a point of tsar, discomfort, inconvenience. Inui, hachna, tshuva, kapar, it's a different concept. And therefore, sure, his personal bed he should turn over, which will make him uncomfortable. But that's it. So that's the machlekes. That's the point of contention. Bottom line is, all agree by a yachel, if you can do it, turn over your bed. If it's ein yachel, if it's not practical, don't do it. Rabbi Yehuda just adds that just as by avelis of a mace, hafichas amita applies to all beds in the home, we don't want to differentiate, we want to keep things consistent. We apply that formula to here as well. All beds are turned over. Now this is the Bryce's version of events. But back in our Mishnah, we didn't seem to have this discussion. Rabbi Yehuda was the one who says, kviyas amita, turn over the bed, sleep on the floor. Chacham disagreed completely. It's not applicable on Tisha B'Av. In fact, the halacha is like our Tana, like our Mishnah. According to our Mishnah, Chacham disagreed entirely with this concept. We don't require turning over beds, perhaps because it's not practical for all. The Uberis, the Minikais, it's not going to work for them. So since it's not a universally, a practical thing, we don't do it at all. It's interesting. Taanis brings that nowadays, even the Avel, during the Shiva period, doesn't turn over the beds. The non-Jews might take a look and say, what are you involved in? Sorcery, all kinds of magic and stuff. They're going to get superstitious about the fact that we're turning over beds. And therefore nowadays, due to that concern, we are not noyig in this din of kfiyas hamita. Okay, let's do a quick chazar of today's daf. We started about Sudam Hafsekes. So it's the last and final meal, and it's Efta Chatzos. We have restrictions. According to Tanakama, we don't include two types of cooked dishes in that meal, nor do we partake in basar v'yayin. According to Chacham and the other shittas here, as long as you minimize, you change, you deviate, that's enough. Regarding Rechitza during Sudam Hafsekes, we have machlekes. We learned that Tisha B'Av has elements of Inoi, enhanced Inoi, plus elements of Avelis as well. For instance, the Issa to learn, because Torah is Mesamech Lev. We have 4 different types of Talmud Torah. Conventional learning, which provides spiritual sustenance. Davar that he's rugged by. He's familiar with it, he enjoys the experience, that's certainly Asur. Those chapters in Yirmiyah, etc., which described tragedies that befell Klal Yisrael, Dvarim Arayim, is mutter. Something which he's unfamiliar with, he's still raw, it's going to be a superficial learning. In fact, he has sar, it's not getting to the point here. That's a machlekes. And regarding children in cheder, it's also machlekes. Technically, malach on Tisha B'Av is mutter, but it really depends on the minhag HaMokim. Talmid Chacham should be batal. According to the Rashbag, everybody should present as a Talmid Chacham in this regard. Either way, one should be careful not to be Mesiach Das from the Avelus. Kol Mas'abal Yushalayim Zoichav Rab Simchasam. Concluded with the halacha of Kviyas Hamita. Machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabban. B'suras Toivos and Hatzlacha Rabbah to you.